a writer who's preparing to write a query letter or a submission letter or whatever you call it to an agent or a publisher, this is a video in which I'm going to take you through the process of writing a pitch and also the components of the letter. So I advise you to either have some pen and paper handy or something you can type into so you can make notes. This is a structure I have been teaching for quite a few years now, and I believe writers find it helpful. They tell me that it is, but you be the judge. This will be quite a long one, although I may do a shorter version just because, you know, algorithm. So I'm going to presume that your manuscript is finished. And if you are a first-time novelist or children's writer, you need to have a finished manuscript. With nonfiction, you can mostly get away with not having a finished manuscript, depending on what it is. Although if you have memoir or other narrative nonfiction, it is really useful if you can complete the whole thing, just so you know what you are writing before you start querying. I'm using the term querying because a lot of Southern Hemisphere writers hang out in Northern Hemisphere spaces online, and therefore they're familiar with the term querying, so I may as well use it. So the first question to ask yourself as a writer is, which genre am I writing in? For example, some writers will say they're writing literary crime when actually they're just writing a police procedural, but they think literary crime sounds better. So they'll say that. If it's not literary, don't say it's literary. No one's going to think less of you if it's not literary. I have seen some manuscripts labelled science fiction when they are very clearly fantasy. Please do not be confusing the two. Also, don't call it romance if it's not following the conventions of romance fiction. The romance readership is pretty clear about what constitutes a romance novel, so just because you happen to have a romance in the story does not necessarily make it a romance novel. So make sure you've identified the genre that a bookseller, publisher, and more importantly, reader will think you are writing in. Now it's time to think about your readership if you haven't already. Think about which other books they might like to read, which TV shows they watch, which movies they watch, other interests they may have that are related to reading the genre that you are writing in. It doesn't have to be too prescriptive, just write some notes just so you have a sense of who you are pitching this work to. Because while the pitch is for the agent or publisher in the first instance, ultimately it's trying to connect with the reader. And agents and publishers are of course also readers. Now, I'd like you to think about what your hook is, and this is quite important. The hook is what makes your story, or whatever it is, different to what else is out there. Now, you might say, well, it's a romance novel. How different can it be? Well, the difference is in the characters, the setting, those sorts of things, but it has to be sufficiently different to what else is out there to attract the attention of an agent or publisher and ultimately reader. If it's not different, it needs to be better. Because if you think about yourself as a reader, if you pick up a book in a bookshop and you think, well, that sounds exactly like this other book that I've read and that one was great, this one needs to be better or I'm not going to read it. So apply your own behaviour as a reader to the agent, publisher, and ultimately reader of your book. So all of that informs how you are going to write your pitch. And the pitch is what's going to make the agent, publisher, and ultimately reader want to read your book/manuscript more than anyone else's at that point in time. And if you have an inherent resistance to the idea that they are going to want to read your manuscript more than anyone else's, you are not ready to submit. You have to believe in that work. You have to think, yep, this is amazing. People are going to love it. I'm going to put it out there and someone's going to read it. Or more than a few someone's are going to read it. So when you sit down to write your pitch, try to step outside yourself and put yourself in the place of someone who knows absolutely nothing about your story. What is the most important thing that someone needs to know about your manuscript? What makes it good, different, and appealing? It's not likely to be the main character's name or the setting. It's not going to be the word count or the genre. It's going to be how they will feel about it. Because the reading of the book is an experience that you are creating for them as the author. And how they feel about it determines how they're going to talk about it to other people. It determines whether they're going to come back for your next book. So if you are stuck, ask yourself, why would a reader want to read this book over and above anything else that is out there at the moment? And I go back to the point about feeling resistance on this matter. So in writing the pitch, I recommend you start by writing down or typing out feelings that you associate with the experience of reading your novel. So is it thrilling? Is it romantic? Is it sad? Is it moving? Those sorts of things. Zero in on 2 or 3 that most accurately describe the experience the reader will have both reading your manuscript and after. Now write down the most important elements of the story. What is the essence of it? Is it a coming-of-age story set in rural Victoria in the 1980s? Is it a crime story featuring a female detective and her offsider set in far north Queensland in the present day? So build on that. Combine the facts of the story with the feelings it's going to give the reader. So in this way, it becomes the moving, unforgettable coming-of-age story of 14-year-old Dylan set in Violet Town in 1984. Or it's the chilling, unsettling crime novel set in far north Queensland in 2025, featuring new detective Libby Smith and her cantankerous about-to-retire offsider Frank Lee. So I've also added adjectives to those descriptions, and this is another important part of it. The facts and the feelings, and add in some adjectives where appropriate. But you can see how the second set of statements is different to the first. The second set of statements basically gives you a sense of the story. The first is just a statement of fact. So the series of exercises I gave you before should inform that process of writing the pitch. You've thought about who you're telling it to. What's the audience like? What are they interested in? And then the hook is what's different about it. That should motivate you to go into your story and think about those elements that make it different, and then give us the facts and feelings about those. So then in terms of the structure of the query letter / submission letter / pitch letter, whatever you'd like to call it, I would recommend these days opening with the pitch. So, dear so-and-so, my manuscript is pitch there. It's 70,000 words in length. The manuscript is ready now. Any other information about the manuscript, don't put in that you've been writing it for 8 years or it's 10 drafts. They don't need to know that. You can then go into another paragraph or two, but make them short paragraphs if it's 2, of description of the storyline. Don't try to give all the characters, don't try to give everything that happens. It's not a synopsis, it's a description. Only provide a synopsis if it is asked for. You can leave it open-ended. You don't need to tell them the story all the way through. You can just give enough description that they have a sense that the story has some development going on. Then you give a bit of bio information. You give any information that is relevant to the story you are submitting. You don't need to give a life history, nor do you need to worry if you don't have writing credits, at least not in my opinion. If this is a story about a nurse, for example, tell them that you worked as a nurse for 20 years, if you did. If you worked as a nurse for 20 years and didn't have time to enter writing competitions, that's okay. The nurse part is more important. So that structure again, open with the pitch. Such and such is my little story about blah, 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 blah. Give the pitch. Here's the word count. You can give the genre. Sorry, I should have mentioned that earlier. And I should also have mentioned that you can give some sense of what the readership will like. So you can go, here is the pitch, here's the word count, genre. It will appeal to readers of such and such. You give the description, you give the bio information, then you are out of there. 1 page, if it were printed out, that's it. So to recap, start with the pitch, give them the word count, the genre, will appeal to readers of or viewers of, whatever it is, however you want to identify that audience and their interests, into the description, and then give the bio information, and then a nice little concluding sentence. Thanks for reading, bye. I'm actually going to put this structure in the caption. I think that will make things more clear, because I now feel like I'm rambling too much. I've given you a lot of information. Good luck writing the pitch letter. Thanks for watching if you've watched this far. Bye.